Hello, everybody. How are you all tonight? Thank you for coming out amidst some not so great weather, though it did at least stop being really bad just in time for tonight. So we're very glad to see you all here. I'm Renee Rogers. I'm the museum director here at the Birthplace of Country Music Museum. We've got Sam Parker up in the corner doing all of our cool tech stuff for us. And we are excited to host two people from our own team tonight. Yay! Curatorial Manager Erika Barker and Collection Specialist Julia Underkoffler. They'll be talking to us in just a minute or two about country music, comedy, and the small screen. But before we get started, I do have a few housekeeping details. If you need to go to the restroom at any point during the program, the restrooms are down the hall and on the left. The front of the museum will be locked in about 15 minutes. So you won't be able to go out the front door anymore. So if you do need to leave before the program has finished, please just use this side door right beside the performance theater and go out that way. There will be a Q&A afterwards. You will have a chance to ask Erika and Julia some questions. Just be kind. And we will also send a survey out afterwards because we love to get y'all's feedback on these speaker sessions programs and ideas for future topics that you'd like us to cover. So keep an eye out for that, and please take the 2 or 3 minutes it takes to answer those questions. Finally, please consider sharing a donation after tonight's program. For those of you who are here with us, there is a donation jar right there. And for those of you who are with us on YouTube, Sam will put the donation link into one of the comments below the YouTube video. Almost everything that the museum offers is either free or low cost. Tonight is one of those free programs. We try and make ourselves as accessible to our community as possible. So anything you give helps us to continue to do educational and public programs like this one. Before we get into our presentation, I did want to just introduce you properly to tonight's speakers. There's a few of you who know them better than me, but not everybody. Erika Barker is the curatorial manager at the Birthplace of Country Music Museum. She is active in a variety of community organizations and activities, including the Awards Committee for the Tennessee Association of Museums, the former president for one more month?
One more week.
One more week.
Saturday is my last day.
Yeah, president for one more week, and then former president of Arts Alliance Mountain Empire. And she is also on the Little City Roller Derby team. And if you have not seen her out there with her sharp elbows, you should definitely go do that. And she is a lead singer for a a soul rock band, blues. I've been to them several times. Blues rock band, Junction 4961. And Julia Underkoffler is the Birthplace of Country Music Museum's collection specialist. She recently graduated from East Tennessee State University with an MA in Public History. She's active with the Northeast Tennessee Museums Association, and she is an avid fan of football and live music. She was also an intern with us before she became a staff member, so we're very glad to have both of them here tonight. Welcome to you both. We've spent all day together already, but I am going to hand it over to you all for your presentation, and I hope you all enjoy.
It's never enough time, Renee. Howdy! I'm just so proud to be here. How's everybody tonight? We are going to be talking about comedy and country music, like Renee said, but also comedy and country music and how it's been represented on TV. So I want to start by talking just a little bit about the history of television in the United States. So TV has existed, although not in a commercially viable way, throughout the rise and dominance of radio. The first television broadcast was actually in 1927 by Philo Farnsworth. And in the 1920s, there were only about a few dozen TVs in existence, most of them in research settings. But RCA, which is one of the biggest companies behind the popularization of the radio, poured millions of dollars into developing television as well. In 1936, the first major TV broadcast was the Berlin Summer Olympic Games, which was televised by Telefunken using RCA equipment. The BBC also started their the world's first regular high-definition television station in November of that same year. And then by 1939, RCA was televising the New York World's Fair, speeches by President Roosevelt, and even baseball games. Still, the technology was very primitive at the time. During World War II, development of commercial television took a back seat to war efforts, as did a lot of other things at that time. But after World War II, television began to grow at an exponential rate. From the 1940s through the 1960s, advances in technology, greater disposable income, and an increase in the number of stations available helped television become the era's primary mass medium. Before 1947, only a few thousand American homes owned a television set. But just 5 years later, that number jumps up to 12 million, and by 1955, half of American homes had a TV. Families often said that they found sitting around their TVs, new TVs, that it helped parents and children to socialize and connect in new ways and helped the families spend more time together, which is very ironic considering what people say about television today. Some of the highest rated TV shows in the 1960s, which is one of the time periods we'll be talking about predominantly today, included I Love Lucy, but also the Beverly Hillbillies, Gunsmoke, Wagon Train, Bonanza, the Andy Griffith Show, and you can see how country music and country life is represented in all of these shows, which were the most popular at that time. Nielsen ratings is what we use to find this information, and the Nielsen is the primary source of television ratings. It's a company that began by measuring radio ratings in the 1930s, but in 1950 they began to implement those same methods to track TV ratings, and that's still what we use today. And now I'm going to turn it over to Julia a little bit to tell us about the first of our three performers.
So I'm going to start with Tennessee Ernie Ford, and he was born Ernest Jennings Ford on February 13th, 1919, right here in Bristol, to Maud and Clarence T. Ford. He grew up in a very religious and musical family, and it was stated by his parents in an interview in 1957 that he was good at singing even before he was good at talking. The Ford family even had a quartet of their own, where Stanley, Ernie's older brother, played the piano while Ernie and his parents sang. Ernie also joined another quartet in high school, and when one of the members left, his father filled in. And then after graduating high school, he was job searching, as you do when you don't have a ton of money and can't go to college. And he found his place at WOPI, which you can see him sitting in front of in that middle picture. And he worked there for much of the later part of the Depression as an announcer. And during his time there, he learned about the Cincinnati Conservatory of Music, and in 1939, he had saved up enough money for about 8 months' worth of rent and a bus ticket to travel to Cincinnati, Ohio. However, once he got there, he could not afford the full curriculum. He was only able to take 3 voice classes, and he only ended up being there for 3 months. After all that money saved up, he only spent 3 months there. After he spent his time in Cincinnati, he came back south and worked for both WATL in Atlanta, Georgia, and WORI in Knoxville, Tennessee. And after the Pearl Harbor attacks on December 7th, 1941, Ernie knew that at the stage of life he was in, it wasn't going to be long until he was going to be drafted. So himself and several of his friends went to the local recruiting office in Knoxville and enlisted. He was sworn in as a private and got into the U.S. Army Air Corps. And after training, he moved to California to work at George Air Force Base, and he met his future wife, Betty, there. When he was honorably discharged in 1945 as a rank of first lieutenant, Betty and himself moved back to Bristol, and Ernie went back to work at WOPI again. But only after 4 months there, he got fired. W.A. Wilson, who was the general manager and president of the radio station at the time, did not have a future for Ernie there. But obviously, as we all know, that worked out for him. He and Betty decided that they were going to move to Alaska after he got fired because the government was paying for people to move to Alaska at that point. However, they stopped in California to visit Betty's parents. And he got a job at KXSK FM. But however, due to the turnover there, he was not happy. So he moved to, he found a job in Reno, Nevada. And he did not like it there. He thought it was going to be a lot more rural, like here in Tennessee. But it was not. It was so close to Las Vegas that all the lights and busyness was not what he wanted. So he moved back to California due to a persistent general manager at KXLA who had offered Ernie a job right before he left for Reno. And he took that job, and he became a combination announcer and hillbilly jockey. And the general manager stated why he was so persistent was because Ernie was so funny on air. He'd tell jokes, anecdotes, anything that came to his mind. And then instead of just playing a particular Western tune, he'd sing it right along with the recording. This is also when Ernie added Tennessee to his name as a part to remind people where he's from. He's living in Southern California at this point, and he's got this very strong Southern accent. So it was a way to remind people where he came from and why he has this accent. However, this is also a very big point for Ernie, not only because he's got this radio disc jockey job, but it's also where he met Cliffy Stone, who ended up managing him for 10 years. Later in his career, Stone also hosted Hometown Jamboree, which is very similar to other earlier radio shows like WLS National Barn Dance and WSM Barn Dance, which is better known as the Grand Ole Opry. Due to the Hometown Jamboree, he was able to meet stars like Merle Travis and Molly B. After two successful episodes on I Love Lucy as Cousin Ernie, he got his big break on the College of Musical Knowledge as the host after a 4-year hiatus of the show. I'm going to turn it back over to Erika now to talk about our other two.
All right. Sarah Ophelia Colley Cannon, who is better known as Minnie Pearl, has become known as the queen of country comedy and is often seen in her knee-length, flamboyant, unstylish dresses with a straw hat and flowers and the $1.98 price tag on it. And, of course, her cheerful howdy that I greeted you all with here today. But she grew up, she was the youngest of 5 daughters. Her father was a prosperous lumber magnate, and her mother was a homemaker and organist at the local church. But their family lost their fortune in the Great Depression. Despite this, Sarah still had a relatively affluent childhood. She always wanted to be a dramatic actress growing up. She never really saw herself as a country or comedian person. She came to appreciate and admire those things later in life, but when she was younger, she believed she was going to be the next star dramatic actress. She studied acting at a fashionable finishing school called Ward Belmont, and after school, she returned home to teach dance classes for a few years in her hometown. She says she felt like a bit of a failure during this time in her life, but she soon found another job. At 22, she took a job as an itinerant community theater director for the Wayne P. Sewell Producing Company. This was a theater company based out of Atlanta, but what they did was they would travel, or they would send directors out to small rural communities and help them put on plays that the company owned in that community. So Sarah was one of these directors, and she was able to travel to all sorts of different small southern communities. It was her first kind of taste of touring life, and she says in her memoir that she really enjoyed being on the road and getting to see all the new communities. She excelled at this position, and soon she was also a trainer and supervisor and teaching the other traveling directors. But because she was also exposed to a lot of different people, this is actually where she got her inspiration for the Minnie Pearl story. On one of these trips, she was sent to a small town in Alabama, and she arrived in the middle of a snowstorm. And when she got there, there was no one to greet her at the train. They did not know she was coming. They had forgotten that they had hired this company to come to the school. So she had to find her own way to the school. And when she got there, she could tell she wasn't really wanted, but that they were committed to it at that point. You know, she was there. She was going to put on this play, but they had nowhere for her to stay. And so they reached out to a local family that lived about a mile from the school. It was a very poor rural family, but they agreed to put her up for 10 days. And so she stayed with them in their son's room. And that family, she just absolutely fell in love with them. They were very kind, but also very humorous in a very deadpan way, and didn't realize that they were being funny a lot of the time. Their son, who she only ever heard called Brother, one time she asked him why they called him Brother, and he said, well, they named me Kyle, but I never much cared for the name. And she said, well, why don't you change it then? And he said, I never much cared for the name. I wish they had called me Jim. And she said, well, why didn't you change it then? And he said, well, I have a brother named Jim. And it seems like that sort of conversation happened a lot in this household. And so after staying with them, she sort of began developing this Minnie Pearl character, and she began to open the plays when she would put on plays at different towns as Minnie Pearl doing a comedy bit instead of as Sarah Cawley just talking as the director. And she found that went over very well, and so she sort of started experimenting with Minnie Pearl at that time, but her first real professional appearance as Minnie was in 1939 when she was hired to do a Minnie performance at a Pilots Club convention. And this is when she bought her very first Minnie Pearl outfit. Before that, she was just doing the Minnie Pearl act in her own normal clothes and affecting the mannerisms of Minnie Pearl. But she went to a thrift store and bought the entire costume for about $10. And the price tag on her hat was actually an accident. She didn't mean to leave that on, but it fell out while she was doing an act once, and somebody laughed, and so she decided to keep it. So it's the little things that can really affect a performance for a lot of performers. Her first Grand Ole Opry performance was in 1940, and when she was first on the Opry, she was still wearing that same $10 outfit that she bought at a thrift store. And her sister, Virginia, helped her write a lot of those early jokes. In 1947, she married her husband, Henry Cannon, who was a former Army Air Corps pilot, and he later created his own private flight service for the Opry stars, and he would fly them to all of their non-Opryland performances, and then they could get back in time for Saturday. So he sort of became a private jet for all of the stars, but mostly Minnie. From 1948 to 1958, she worked on the Grand Ole Opry with Roz Brasfield and really sort of perfected a double comedy style, which is when neither one of them was the straight man, but they would take turns being the one who got to throw the punchline and the one who was the normal person. And this was very unusual at the time. Usually there was a designated person in every act that would be the funny person and one who was the serious person, but they were very good at flipping the script. And then she joined the Hee Haw cast from 1969 to 1990, and that's where we're going to leave her story for now. The other one I'd like to talk about today is Roni Stoneman, who was born in 1938. Roni is the second youngest child and the youngest daughter of 23, born to Ernest Pop Stone and Hattie Stoneman. 13 of those 23 children lived to be adults, and almost all of them were musical. Pop Stoneman, of course, is a very important part of our story here in Bristol. He is the one who told Ralph Peer to come to Bristol for that 1927 sessions that the museum is centered around. He's also the most recorded person to have performed at the Bristol sessions. He brought in several of the other musicians for that and helped Ralph Peer kind of get things started here. Before the Depression, the Stonemans lived pretty well off of Pop's music. In 1927, they had even just bought a house with all the modern conveniences in Galax, Virginia. But then when the Depression hit, they also lost everything, and they moved around a lot and lived in poverty while Pop worked odd jobs and tried to restart his music career. During this time, they moved to Carmody Hills, Maryland, which is in the Washington, D.C. area, and that's where Roni grew up. All of the children, as I mentioned before, were fairly musical. I think almost all of them played instruments. But they got this way partially because they grew up during the Depression and they didn't have much in the way of toys, but they did have music. And Roni likes to tell the story of how Pop would build instruments, and he would leave them on the bed, and then he would leave the house for work, and he would tell the kids not to touch the instruments because he knew if he told them not to touch it, that's exactly what they would do. And he was right. As soon as he would walk out of the house, the kids would pick up the instrument, they'd play with it all day, and then they had to tune it back perfectly to the way he left it so that he wouldn't be able to tell that they had played the instruments. And so by the 1940s, all of the children could play multiple instruments, but those who ended up becoming most successful are the ones who specialized, and for Roni, that was the banjo. Roni joined the Stoneman family band in 1947 at age 9. Initially, they were called Pop Stoneman and his Little Pebbles. But in the 1940s, I know I love that name. In the 1940s, Pop Stoneman and some of the children won a talent show that was held at Constitution Hall in Washington. And Roni says that her older brothers didn't want to perform with Pop at this contest because they didn't think his music was cool anymore. And when Hattie heard that, she said, well, we're going to show them. She said, we'll take that prize from those boys. And she was right. She was, in Roni's words, mad as a hornet. And so she fiddled hard and strong, and they won that contest. But winning that contest also came with a prize that led to 6 months of local TV time, which ultimately led to a whole host of other opportunities for the Stoneman family. And Roni had her first solo recording in 1957 at age 19, which was Lonesome Road Blues, and appeared on the Mike Seeger anthology, American Banjo Tunes and Songs in Scruggs Style. And this was the first time that a woman had been recorded playing Scruggs-style banjo. The Stonemans became wildly popular in the 1960s and played festivals across the country, recorded several albums. And in 1966, they landed their own syndicated TV show called Those Stonemans. Roni's solo spot on this show was often the comedic dirty old egg-sucking dog. She was a very funny performer whenever she was on stage. She was funny off stage too. Roni was really kind of the same person on or off stage. She was always on, and she was always making jokes and telling stories and just making people feel at home. In 1967, the Stonemans won Vocal Group of the Year, and in 1968, after Pop died, Roni, a previously recorded song by Roni and Pop was released called The Mountaineer's Courtship, which is one of the last attempts by a major record label to really push old-time music. Roni left the group in 1971 and then joined Hee Haw in 1973 because she was really looking for something. She had a child at that point, and she didn't really want to be on the road anymore. She was trying to find something that was a little more stable for her and for the kids, where she could just go in and record and then go back home and not have to be on the road all the time. And again, I'll turn it back over to Julia to tell us a little bit more about what Tennessee Ernie Ford has been up to.
Okay, back with Ernie. So the Ford show debuted on October 4th, 1956. And the show was actually sponsored by the Ford Motor Company. So it was not named after Ernie. It was named for the Ford Company. And there's no known relation between the two of them. The show aired daily on NBC and was produced by Bud Yorkin, Norman Laird, Danny Arnold, and Cliffy Stone. They started airing the show at noontime, and then it moved to the primetime spot. Ernie had a very specific idea for how he wanted his show to run, and his stipulations would be that the production were to be at a minimum, and above all, the program was to be live, and the show would end with a hymn. It took a while for the network to get behind the way Ernie wanted to run his show, because it was unusual. It was not the way most shows were run at this time. However, after only 4 months of being on air, he hit the top 10 popularity, which was mainly dominated by veterans at the time, so that was a very big deal. And the hymn at the end of the show was became one of the most popular parts of the show, and harkens back to his days on the Hometown Jamboree, where it ended pretty much the same exact way. Ernie was mostly accompanied by Molly B., Doris Drew, Skip Farrell, Dick Williams, and Jack Fascinato, who was the orchestra conductor for many of the shows. Ernie met several of these cast members through Cliffy Stone and the Hometown Jamboree, and the Ford show became many of their big breaks to get into the entertainment industry. On October 18th, 1956, just the third broadcast ever of the Ford show, Ernie performed his hit cover, 16 Tons. And in September 1958, the broadcast became color. After 5 seasons, 191 broadcasts, and 2 operettas, the Ford show came to an end on June 29, 1961. However, not to the lack of trying by the Ford Motor Company. They reportedly offered Ernie the largest salary ever to a primetime host, due to them not wanting it to end. However, Ernie was done. He didn't want to mess with it anymore. He wanted to go home, farm, spend time with his family. He always said, "I'm working for the same reason most folks work, to bring up a family, to have a nice house, and to do many other things I want to do." Ford showed that hillbillies can wear suits and be educated and professional by sounding so country while wearing a $300 tailor-made suit and smoking a $50 pipe. So also, the Ford show was one of the first places the Peanuts were ever showed in animated form, and a lot of times it was how the show opened. So here's a clip of that.
Ready? Ready.
Ladies and gentlemen, The Ford Show. Starring Tennessee Ernie Ford. Ernie Ford. Ernie Ford. Ernie Ford. Ernie Ford. Ernie Ford.
This has been a recorded announcement.
Such a great clip. But as variety shows are, there are a ton of guest stars. Here is just a very small list of the guest stars that were featured on the Ford show over the 5 seasons, and most notably Minnie Pearl, who was featured on the show 5 different times. And I'm going to hand it back over to Erika to talk about Hee Haw.
Welcome to Hee Haw, starring Buck Owen and Roy Clark.
I know we all want to watch the whole thing. We had to cut it down. You'd be here all night otherwise. Hee Haw was America's quintessential comedy show for more than 20 years. It first aired on June 15th in 1969 as a replacement series for the Smothers Brothers Comedy Hour. But after a resounding success of that first season, CBS slated the series for a mid-season debut, and the then weekly show aired from December 17th, 1969 through December 27th, 1997. It's one of the longest-running syndicated shows in TV history. The show was created by Frank Papayette and John Aylesworth, a Canadian comedy team known as the Kings of Variety Comedy Shows. They worked on many shows together in Canada and in the U.S., including the Jimmy Dean Show, which was the first time they worked with a country star. They got a lot of their ideas that would later be seen on Hee Haw from working with Jimmy Dean and having that kind of experience with a Southerner for the first time. But it was while working on the Jonathan Winters show that a CBS producer told them that they should take a chance writing their own show. So they started brainstorming about what that might look like, and they realized when they looked at the Nielsen ratings that all of the top 10 shows were country-oriented sitcoms. Green Acres, Petticoat Junction, Andy Griffith, the Beverly Hillbillies. And then they also looked around the room that they were in at the time, and they saw a magazine with Loretta Lynn on the cover that said, "Country is hot," in big letters. And they were like, you know what this country needs? An all country variety show. And so they took that idea to their manager, Bernie Brillstein, who suggested that they turn it into a country-style version of Laugh-In, which was a popular show on NBC Network at the time, one of their competitors. They liked that idea, and so they kind of ran with that, and they came up with the name Hee Haw because yee-haw is an expression of elation used by hillbillies, and so they thought they would take that and then combine it with a braying donkey, which is kind of a sound of laughter, and that's where they got Hee Haw, the name, and that's where they got their logo. One of the key things that led to the success of this show, though, was a technological advancement that happened around the same time that Hee Haw began filming, and that was the invention of time code. Time code was invented by the Electronic Engineering Company of California, and they developed this system that could track whatever was shot so that it could be easily located scene by scene. And this meant that Hee Haw could be filmed in Nashville over a series of a couple of weeks, everything for the whole season, and then they could take all of that film back to their studio in LA, and they could piece it back together and cut it up and put it in the order that they wanted to put it in and edit it. So that allowed them to do this fast-paced, short-form joke style that is so popular in Hee Haw. It also allowed them to do all of their guest appearances were all within about a 2-week period. They recorded all of their guest stars in the same time so they could get that done and taken care of. In 1970, there was something called the Rural Purge that happened in CBS. The Hee Haw producer John Aylesworth calls it the Great CBS Country Massacre. But this is when CBS decided to drop all of the rural shows on the network. So they cut everything, including Hee Haw, despite the fact that it had good ratings at the time. It was number 16 in 1970, and yet they still decided to drop the show. Pat Butcher would later say that they cut every show that had a tree in it. But one instigating factor for this rural purge was a new primetime access rule, which is an FCC regulation that promoted competition in program production and distribution, but it prevented networks from airing their own shows and forced them to air local programs during primetime spots. This did create a lucrative spot for first-run syndicated shows, which is what Hee Haw would become once CBS dropped them. Papayette and Aylesworth's company, Young Street Productions, maintained ownership of the series, and they were able to put together a syndication deal that allowed the show to continue in the same format for the rest of its run. In 1981, Gaylord, which is also known for the Grand Ole Opry, acquired Young Street Productions, and then in 1984, Frank Papayette and John Aylesworth left the show for good. In 1970s, you start to see a decline in this type of program. The variety show era is kind of coming to an end. But Hee Haw seems to survive that for at least another decade. It's not until the 1980s that you start to see a decline in Hee Haw ratings. And even at the very end of its run, when the show ended in 1993, it still had 3.5 million viewers and was being shown on 140 local network markets, which is a bigger audience than some of today's hit cable TV shows have. So you can see how much people really resonated with the show. As our introduction here showed, Buck Owens and Roy Clark presented the show for most of its run, and the Hee Haw also featured a very large cast of beloved regulars. But we are going to focus on Minnie Pearl and Roni Stoneman today. Minnie Pearl joined the cast from 1969 to 1990, and she had many roles on the show over the years, including, notably, she was the teacher trying to help her students in line, keep her students in line at the schoolhouse, the editor at the Grinders Switch Gazette. She was the leader of the All Jug Band, and she was frequently offering advice in Quilting Bee sketches, and also in the riotous cooking spot with Grandpa Jones. Roni Stoneman was on the show from 1973 until 1990, and she was beloved for portraying the braying, gap-teethed, ironing board harpy Ida Lee Nagger, as seen pictured here. But she also had, she would shriek one-liners at her shiftless drunk of a husband, Laverne, who was played by Gordy Tapp. In addition to Ida Lee, though, she also played Mophead, the maid at the Empty Arms Hotel skits, and was frequently showcased in the show's Hee Haw Banjo Band, demonstrating her picking prowess as well as her humor. Roni and Minnie Pearl are both what we consider character actresses, which means that they are sort of known for playing unusual, eccentric, or interesting characters in supporting roles rather than the leading role. This is often in show business a thinly disguised way of saying that they were not pretty enough to be leading ladies, which both women talk about in their memoirs about how that's something that sort of followed them throughout their lives, that people placed them in a specific bubble based on that, but they were both able to kind of overcome that and make amazing careers out of it anyway. The first time Sarah realized that she might not be conventionally pretty is when she overheard her mother's friend say, "She's a plain little thing, isn't she?" as a child. And for Roni, she has a story in her memoir about how when she was first introduced to the Hee Haw producer by a mutual friend who thought she should join the show, he looked at her and said, "You're right, you're just what we need. We have all the pretty girls we want." Which was a common refrain, she says, among the show. But Roni was actually born wall-eyed, so when you look straight, she's, in her words, that means when you look straight ahead, your wall looks at the eye. But it is a medical condition that means that one eye turns slightly outward. She also had a gap in her teeth that could have been fixed as a child, but they couldn't afford the dentistry to do it. And it ended up being a good thing and a blessing, she says, because that's what became one of her most notable features when she got onto Hee Haw, was that gap tooth. And so both of these women also sort of fall into a trope that existed at the time and still does, which is the Daisy Mae versus Sadie Hawkins. And that comes from Lil Abner, which was a satirical hillbilly comic from the 1930s to the 1970s. And Hee Haw is an excellent example of this because you can see how they have the Daisy Mays on the show and the Sadie Hawkins characters. Some of the Daisy Mays on the show were Ganilla Hutton, who played Nurse Goodbody, which was the foil for Archie Campbell's leering doctor. Also Lisa Todd, who was cast as Sunshine Cornsilk, who was hopelessly pursued junior samples throughout the show, which is essentially what the Daisy Mae character plays in Lil Abner, which her obsession with the main character. But there is a great history of comedy, and particularly of character comedy in women in country music, going back to the vaudeville age when you have acts like the Cherry Sisters, who were the first so bad it's good comedy that both Minnie and Roni showcase when they start singing very loudly and very off-key intentionally for a laugh. And then you also have artists like Rose Melville, who had a Sis Hopkins act that was a shapeless, dressed country rube type personality, and Lotta Crabtree, who was one of the first major female stage personalities with a down-to-earth persona in a very physical act. When the show did start coming to a close, the Hee Haw girls were some of the first ones to go because I think they fell into this sort of stereotype a little bit. And Roni recalls, again in her memoir, that they brought in all these new girls. They didn't know anything about the show, and she thinks that they just didn't realize how much talent went into it and how much work went into that. They just saw the girls with the boobs, and they thought that's all they needed. But it was a lot more than that, and you can see some of that too. I've got a clip up here if you want to play that. This is one of the Quilting Bee sketches that shows Minnie as well as some of the other Hee Haw girls.
I have a problem. No matter what boy I bring home, my daddy just hates him.
Oh, well, I had the same kind of problem, Victoria. But one day I brought home a feller that looked like my daddy and talked like my daddy.
What happened?
My mother couldn't stand him.
Y'all stay tuned now, you hear? Whoop.
But beyond just the regular actors and actresses on the show, Hee Haw, much like the Ford show, also showcased a huge variety of country musicians and also some non-country musicians as well. We've got, again, a couple of highlights up here. Loretta Lynn was one of the first to be on the show. The very first episode was actually Loretta Lynn and Charlie Pride. And Loretta was one of the most occurring guest stars on the show. She had 24 different appearances on Hee Haw. Tammy Wynette is second with 21 appearances. Other notable figures were Dolly Parton and Porter Wagner on the show. Also, Jerry Lee Lewis was the first one that they had physically in the studio, and also reportedly maybe one of the hardest ones to work with. And I'll turn it over to Julia now to talk a little bit about the impact of all of this.
Okay, so as you can see, both of these shows show that there's a multi-generational audience for these country-based shows, whether it's dialed down like the Tennessee Ernie Ford show or dialed up like Hee Haw. Although both of these shows are a part of popular culture history, they are still being used in current television shows and other aspects of popular culture. Both Hee Haw and Tennessee Ernie Ford have made appearances in The Simpsons. Not only have these shows made a huge impact in the television world, sorry, I lost my place. Huge impact in the television world, even though variety shows have gone out of style. They were the base for many artists to get their names out. For example, only 6 months after the release of her debut album, Trisha Yearwood appeared on Hee Haw in January 1992. And even after both of these shows ended, the show regulars still continued to record and appear on other shows. Ernie continued to record for Capitol until 1977 and appeared on television shows until the early 1980s. Roni and her sister Donna continued to perform occasionally together until the 2020s. Sarah continued to perform as Minnie until 1991 when a stroke forced her to stop performing. The stars of both shows received many recognitions for their work in country music and popular culture. Tennessee Ernie Ford is one of the few stars to receive 3 Hollywood Walk of Fame stars in radio, recording, and television. Roy Clark and Buck Owens also received stars, Clark in television and Owens in recording. In 1948, Ford also received the Presidential Medal of Freedom, which, if you remember, Reagan was a guest star on The Ford Show before he was even heavily involved in politics, still during his entertainment career. Reagan stated during his speech at that reception that America is a nation richer in spirit because of Tennessee Ernie Ford. 5 of these stars from the shows have been inducted into the Country Music Hall of Fame. Minnie Pearl in 1975, Grandpa Jones in 1978, Tennessee Ernie Ford in 1990, Buck Owens in 1996, and Roy Clark in 2009. And more to probably and hopefully be inducted in the future. Along with her induction into the Country Music Hall of Fame, Minnie Pearl was also inducted into the Comedy Hall of Fame in 1994, and she was the first woman to do so. Roni Stoneman, along with the rest of the Stonemans, were inducted into the International Bluegrass Music Hall of Fame in 2021. In addition to their inductions and continued career at the end of their shows, they still continue to inspire and influence many. Minnie Pearl has notably influenced comedians like Jeff Foxworthy, Larry the Cable Guy, and Ron White. Other royal comedians today share the same type of down-to-earth style of humor as Minnie Pearl, Roni Stoneman, and the Hee Haw gang, many of which are popular on a social media platform that is very reminiscent of variety shows, TikTok, like Ricky and the Boss, which are short, blue-collar job sketches, and Matt Matthews and Fortune Femster, whose comedy talks about growing up in the South. Both have since become touring comedians, like Dusty Slay and Henry Cho, who have both done shows at the Paramount. Gary Mule Deer was a cast member on the last 2 seasons of Hee Haw. However, he still tours today and combines comedy and music in his set. They're quite funny. I highly suggest y'all go watch some of his clips. Although this talk is mostly focused on country music, Tennessee Ernie Ford has pioneered the constant jumping between genres, as you can see in his albums that he released, as well as the guest stars that appeared on his show. And it's still a trend that you can see today, especially through the country genre, which has had chart-topping success within the last 3 years. Majorly seen through genre crossover, with stars like Beyonce, Chappell Roan, and Post Malone releasing country albums. And Taylor Swift starting in the genre, leaving and coming back. And there were also artists like Sam Hunt and Breland, who started as R&B songwriters and then became country stars. Artists like Hardy, Co Wetzel, and Austin Snell blur the lines between rock and country. Many collaborations throughout the years, like Alan Jackson and Jimmy Buffett's It's 5 O'Clock Somewhere, and Nickelback's Live from Nashville album that features Brantley Gilbert, Ernest, Bailey Zimmerman, and Hardy, have made big headlines throughout the year and are not slowing down anytime soon. Lastly, the 3 places that comedy and country still combine today are in lyrics, like Luke Combs' lyrics, I ain't gotta see my ex-future mother-in-law anymore. Oh Lord, when it rains, it pours, from his song When It Rains, It Pours. Social media, whether it's advertising new songs like Russell Dickerson's advertisements for his song Happen to Me, or Ian Munsick's top 5 videos. And music videos like Brad Paisley's Crushing It, where he turns popular country stars into Avenger-esque characters called the Agents of Crush. And here is a little compilation of funny music videos that I put together.
I sure could use an attaboy or a big old high five. I'd love to hear you're killing it, dude. It's been a long time since I hit one out of the park or nailed it, as they say. I guess I've been in a dry spell, but that's about to change, 'cause every week has a weekend. By this time Friday night, I'll be done with my third can of cold.
For the honeymoon, a couple tickets all inclusive down in Cancun. I couldn't get my money back, so I'm in seat 7A. I'm getting drunk on a plane. I bet the fella on the out thought I was crazy, 'cause I taped your picture to the seat back right beside me. Now I've got empty mini bottles filling both our trays. I'm getting drunk on a plane. Buying drinks for everybody but the pilot. It's a party, got the 737.
So there are just a couple of the many that I found during the rabbit hole of going down, trying to find comedy music videos. There are quite a few and not enough time to play them all. It very much was. I still have the very long list in our notes here because, there's some very funny ones out there. I highly encourage you all to go out and just go watch some music videos because they get very creative. But we're going to move on and open it up to questions. So Renee will walk around and hand the mic so that our YouTube viewers can hear your questions.
So who has a question that they'd like to throw out for? Don't say it yet.
This is more of a comment. Back in the 20th century, when Joe Morrell had the grand guitar out on 81, he showcased a lot of the comedy that were parts of the stage shows. I mean, a lot of the TV shows had their comic actors in there, and Joe was real eager to highlight that part of country music.
I was Roni Stoneman was a really big, did a lot of that comedy during her acts as well. If you ever had a chance to see her. Yeah, June Carter's another one, yeah.
Anyone else?
Does anyone have any questions or comments?
I have a question, but I was going to wait and see if anyone else had one first.
This is more of a comment too, but there's a Broadway musical out called Shucked.
Yes.
That's a lot like, it has a lot of Hee Haw in it.
Yeah,
it's set in Cobb County. It's all about corn. They tell a lot of the corny jokes, but it's when I saw it, I thought of Hee Haw.
Yeah, I read a little bit about it. It is based on Hee Haw, I believe. But yeah, I saw a little bit about that. I thought about including it, but I thought we've gone too deep already. And I haven't seen the play myself, so I didn't want to put it in there without having seen it. But I have heard of it, and I would like to see it one day. Oh no, he's not allowed to ask a question.
That's scary.
So one of the things I was wondering is you've got a ton of really illustrative examples, but how did you choose to focus on just those three?
We started with the focus of those three primarily because those are the three we have more information about within our collections. And so Roni Stoneman and Tennessee Ernie Ford in particular. I'll let Julia talk about that, though.
Yes, our Tennessee Ernie Ford collection is huge. I spend most of my time delving into Tennessee Ernie Ford history. We have a whole collection that documents pretty much his entire career through newspapers. We also have all of his sheet music from the show, all of his capital N-word recordings, pretty much any recording he ever did, we have his sheet music for it. So it's a very vast collection, and people are always willing to give us stuff of Tennessee Ernie Ford, and we're very grateful for that. And we're very grateful to the Ford family for allowing us to be the keepers of most of his collection. Sadly, it doesn't get seen that much, but we do have a very vast collection. And obviously, Roni has played not only at our music festival, Bristol Rhythm and Roots reunion, but also at Farm and Fun Time back in July of 2022. She was here, and she sadly passed away since then. But we are lucky enough that we have had the opportunity to have those shows recorded and documented.
Since Mother's Day just went by, when Tennessee Ernie Ford's son was here, he told me that if it wasn't for his mother, there would never have been a Tennessee Ernie Ford.
Yeah, she was very affluent in making sure, like when he was in Reno, she was still in California, allowing him to take that venture because it aligned with his the career goals that he had at that point. And I believe they had their kids at that point, so she was able to stay home with the kids and not have to pick them up and then move right back. So.
Anyone else? If not, I'm going to ask my question real quick. And I'm going to speak mostly about Tennessee Ernie Ford and Roni because they're the ones that are most connected to us here at the Birthplace of Country Music. Do you have a sense from the research that you did for this presentation about how much was natural comedy on their part as opposed to scripted comedy? I feel like just knowing everything I've heard about Tennessee Ernie Ford certainly makes me think that there was natural comedic sort of instincts there, and certainly knowing Roni, I know she had natural comedic instincts. But I mean, how much of it was something that they were driving themselves or was being scripted for them? Did you get a sense of that?
Speaking for Tennessee Ernie Ford, it definitely seemed like a lot of it was kind of natural. They would run through the show, like an hour or two before the show went live, but that was pretty much all the practice that they had. And those shows were live, so there were a lot of points where they were cracking each other up because they didn't know what they were going to say, especially between whenever Minnie Pearl was featured. There were many clips of Minnie cracking Ernie up and then hence Minnie cracking up because of whatever was said. I'm sure Roni is the same way, but...
Yeah, I think with any comedic person, whether they're acting or doing music, it's kind of there all the time. Sarah, Ophelia, Kali, Cayenne, and I can never decide how many of her names I need to say every time, so it just ends up being all four of them. But she was definitely funny and had been known as a funny person in her private life as well. But for her, Minnie Pearl was always very much a character that was scripted, and she wrote the jokes often with others helping her, but wrote the majority of them, I think, herself. And so she definitely wrote her own material, but it was scripted material that came from her. And she was still funny when she was being Sarah versus when she was being Minnie, but it was a different kind of funny, is kind of the impression I've got from my research. And Roni, as you said, is definitely a very comedic person and humorous person herself. So I'm sure she influenced it. However, Hee Haw did have its own writers, so I'm sure there was limits to how much she was able to influence or write herself versus how much the official show writers were writing. But having seen some of the clips and having met Roni, it seems like she might have had some influence over some of the things that were written for her, or maybe I was able to help with some of it, but I don't know to the extent of how much of that she actually had control over.
If you all haven't been up in the museum before, there's a great Tennessee Ernie Ford film with a clip with him and Minnie Pearl where she cracks him up during it, and it is actually, I've watched it probably a million times.
Yeah.
And I still laugh every time I
time.
watch that particular clip, because watching him get cracked up is quite funny.
And there are many
and
others
she's very
of those.
deadpan with it. You wouldn't. She's like holding strong, and he's just losing it. So.
Also, if you haven't been upstairs, we also have Tennessee Ernie Ford's Medal of Freedom on display as well.
Any other questions? If not, let's put our hands together for Erika and Julia.
We have one more little.
Oh, wait, they have one more thing.
Yeah. So we just wanted to thank y'all for attending tonight and just say have a good night and bless your little pea-picking hearts. Just press.
It didn't play. I was trying to get it to play. It didn't work. Salud.
And for those of you who don't know, this was a longer version of a presentation they will be giving in two.
It's a longer
It's
version.
a longer
Yeah,
version.
sorry. It got confused in my head.
Definitely a longer version.
Yeah.
Of a presentation Erika and Julia will be giving in 2 weeks at the International Country Music Conference. So they will be sharing it much more widely. Yes. We're so glad that you all were here with us. Thank you to my two colleagues who are always brilliant. Let me tell you about a few things that are coming up that you might want to put on your calendars. Our next speaker session is on June 10th at 7 p.m. This is going to be a virtual only one, so it'll be via Zoom. And it is with Charles Hughes, a scholar who has written a book about the connections between country and blues, and he'll be sharing those insights with us. We're quite excited about that. On Friday, June 6th, we have our monthly museum story time, which is free and open to the public. A great opportunity for tiny tots and their grown-ups to listen to a few stories, sing a few songs, and do a few crafts. If you have any 3rd and 5th grade level kiddos in your lives or know of any, we have an art and music workshop with Ellen Elms on Saturday, June 7th. She's the artist in our special exhibits gallery. That's from 1 to 3 p.m. That is one of our few paid programs. It's $20 plus tax, but you get all of the art supplies are provided in that. We have a community square dance coming up at Bristol Ballet on June 14th at 7 p.m. That is free. That's a partnership with Bristol Ballet, and we host that in their studio. It's a great way to get some good exercise and have some good fun and listen to live music. Farm and Fun Time with Warren Treaty and Madeline Edwards will be at the Paramount on Thursday, June 19th at 7 p.m. And then finally, if you've ever wanted to volunteer for a museum, please come and join us on Saturday, June 28th at 10 a.m. for our bi-monthly museum volunteer orientation. Those are the things we've got going. Thank you again for being here. We appreciate it.